Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Another episode today. A little bit unusual. I got a comment on YouTube from Beansball Card blog, Ken Kinsley, who's a regular contributor, and I see him at the shows here. So he's got opinions, and he says, I know you've got friends there, but I find it difficult to believe that Panini listens, much less cares. He and I have talked about that a little bit at the shows. He knows that I'm friends with some of the guys. Some of the guys I'm friends with are no longer there, but they're still my friends. And I know they care about the hobby. They didn't all of a sudden lose their heart. But sometimes when you get in a big company with procedures and processes, things can get bogged down. So I want to respond about non-responding to Ken and others who've had similar kinds of questions, because I think in our hobby, we expect more from the companies because we think, gee, these guys are in the hobby. Many of them are hobbyists like us. Why can't I get my questions answered? Or why can't these customer service problems be fixed? And the card companies are trying to figure out, how do I get feedback of what's the most important stuff for us to work on? So there's a miscommunications or lack of communication. I'm calling it non-response. But thanks sponsors, not just Panini, but Topps Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. Just don't know anybody at a card company that doesn't care about the hobby. They care about their job. They want the hobby to do well. So what I'm saying is that when somebody does not respond to your question, Ken or anybody else, it doesn't mean they didn't hear it, didn't mean they didn't listen. It doesn't mean they don't care. It sure seems like they don't care because you're not getting an answer. But there's a story that's told, I think, by counselors to people who are discouraged that they're not making a difference. It's called the Starfish story, and it's about a child walking along a beach, a young person, and there'd been a really terrible storm, and all these starfish have washed up on the beach, and they're going to die. So the child starts picking up and throwing them back into the water one at a time, which gives them life. Okay, they need to be in the water. But then an adult says, hey, kid, you really can't save them all. You're not really making a difference. And the child obviously picks up one more and says, I'm making a difference for this one. You can't always help everybody, but you can help some. Now, I want to bring that up because when you think about it, you think, gee, what a great kid. But if you're one of the starfish that didn't get picked up, that didn't get your question answered, and sitting there and thinking, all my other buddies got thrown back in the water and I'm here suffocating, I'm going to die. And it sure seemed pretty random and capricious that certain starfishes got saved and certain didn't. That actually may make it worse. Sometimes there's a perception in this industry, if certain people's questions get answered, but yours don't, then that doesn't seem fair. By the same token, the flip side of that, I'm wondering, there are companies that do great at RACs, at random acts of kindness, and have a lot of positive PR. I actually do not believe that's a substitute for good customer service. If I didn't get something I'm supposed to get, I want to get it. I don't want to read about some random act of kindness somewhere else in the world where this company did a nice thing for some customer. I'm going to break it down a little bit today into offense and defense from the company's perspective. I think like a company owner because I was in the hobby, and you get requests. And so the defense is responding. So responding to a customer, a collector having a question, and sometimes you would respond or not respond depending on the situation. And then offense is just when, as a company, we were trying to seek out feedback. We wanted to ask the questions, and we couldn't always get good answers from some of the people. They were not responding to us. And so what does that mean? It doesn't always mean what you think it means. What Ken is referring to is this first line of defense, that the customer is trying to figure out what's going on and asking a question. And if you're polite, I think that's the best way to do it. If you're attacking or adversarial to the card company or the grading company, if your attitude is what's for the good of the hobby, then I think it'll be better received. Writing to me is a lot better than verbal. I've had people come up to me at the National back when I was running the company and saying, well, why are you doing this? If you've got some justification or some reasoning, don't make it too long, the TLDR. I don't want to get something that's too long, but if you can make your point and give me something that I can reflect on and take it back and decide what would it take to make the change that you're suggesting. By the same token, if you're a card company seeking feedback, Don't give some long survey that takes 30 minutes to fill out. Get to the heart of it and find out what you want. I think that people don't respond if it's overwhelming, if it's too long. Don't lay it on too thick. Just be clear what your problem is. And actually, it always helped if you ask for the solution. What are you requesting? Frankly, when we were doing that, if it had an effect on more than just the one person, we probably escalated those. If this was a problem that you were identifying that was not just you, we would give it attention. We did listen, we did care, but we couldn't always do what was requested for one reason or another. But don't expect or demand some immediate solution or immediate fix, but be persistent and be polite. The other thing is, I don't think people consider this, but very often, but there are times when we had the opposite criticisms, that you're too high and the next guy come up, you're too low. For example, if it was with Panini that Ken is mentioning, there's too many parallels. There could be people that say there's not enough parallels. I think there are enough parallels, but if it's in the eye of the beholder, it's an opinion thing, then you're trying to weigh it out. A guy came to me a few months ago, I think I've mentioned this, and he was having problems and he wanted to use my name, or he wanted to get me to intervene. And it really wasn't appropriate. But what I did advise him to do is if you can have a person, a name of a person that you can consistently work with within that company, that's your best bet. And build up a rapport. And if you're just to whom it may concern letters or calling on the phone and who knows who you're going to get, I don't think that's your best bet. Okay, why would a company be silent? Why were we silent at Beckett Publications occasionally? Sometimes we were working on a solution and we weren't quite ready to make a big announcement. I think that's happened to the company since I've left as well. They get some feedback, perhaps even criticism, and they huddle up and they try to figure out what are we going to do here. And then when they get it all lined up, then they make their announcement. Now, there is the possibility sometimes people, if it's an isolated criticism, it's possible that the card company, the grading company, they're really not working on a solution. They think this is a very isolated and it's not worth spending a lot of time on it, and they're hoping it all blows over. That actually can happen. I hope at least you're given the courtesy of a response to say, we're not working on that right now. That's phase 3 or something. Several of the companies didn't seem to be understaffed, but as we've had growth in the industry, you can't instantly hire and train people. If you're understaffed, you're going to have trouble responding to questions, and customer service is one of the tough ones. You really have to have some knowledge to do that. Frankly, to pull people away from other stuff, sometimes that just means you're going to get further behind. Many of the companies, I think my company was getting a little bit too much bureaucracy, red tape, approvals. You're trying to automate. There was documentation required. Some of that, the bigger the company, the more things can get bogged down. I'm not saying you got to cut them any slack, because they really ought to do better in many cases. There also is a perception within companies in the industry that have reputations that if something comes up and they respond, other than giving you complete satisfaction, that they're maybe just making excuses. And that really rings hollow. I've mentioned before the 5 languages of apology, that I'm sorry, I was wrong, I'll make amends, here's why it's not going to happen anymore, please forgive me, we appreciate your business. Those are the 5 languages. If you give a partial apology, again, they want to know that you're making amends, especially, and you're setting up processes and procedures where it's not going to happen again, that they're going to have a place to go to get satisfaction. Lastly, sometimes there are so many things going on that even though they'd like to, they just have their hands full with bigger issues. And your issue will come up, as I said, phase 3 or phase 2. They just have their hands full. Okay, on the part of the companies, when they're communicating to their customers and trying to honestly figure out, hey, how could we improve? I'm not a big fan of just letting anybody respond to that call for feedback. I do think you get the people that care the most to respond if you send out a blanket survey. Anybody can, we want to hear from anybody and everybody. To me, that's not the best way to structure your marketing communications. Through it all, you want to be saying what you mean, doing what you say, only making promises you can and will keep. But collectors expect these larger companies to have their act together, and they don't always understand the financial impact of some of the requests they're making. I know when SGC was being sold to PSA, I heard some suggestions about PSA just needs to reholder the SGC slabs if people want to do that. That's really not very practical. There's nothing wrong with the SGC slabs. If you want to reholder it, there'd be a fee, hopefully not an excessive fee. But sometimes collectors want you to do something and you don't want to do it. You got to have a nice way to say, no, I can't do that, but here's what I can do. When you're trying to get feedback from companies, as we did, you really got to figure out where's the feedback coming from. If I were still in charge, I'd be seeking feedback with some level of stratification. I don't want to know what everybody thinks. I want to know what dealers think, and specifically breakers as opposed to the LCS, collectors with investors as opposed to collectors, kids, adults. I'd want to break it down, and I'd want to know what each of those groups think. And then I'd try to synthesize it to see if there's a strategy that works best for all concerned. The political pollsters, this is a presidential election year, and they're always trying to figure out what's going on. Well, they mess up frequently because they don't deeply investigate the non-response bias. Now, I'm not necessarily going against what I said before, but people don't respond to political polls unless they are deeply invested in the process. They really care to participate in a telephone survey or a mail survey or just how that would go. The ones that don't respond, either in sometimes they don't care enough to spend a lot of time on the phone with a political pollster asking questions. But even if they don't care to do that, they do care about who is elected. Now, for a candidate that I'm going to vote for in November, I think most people vote for the candidate they think cares the most about them or their interests. And in the hobby, the same thing. When you have a choice, you're going to do more business with those who care about you and your interests. And so card companies are not wise, and grading companies, if they think silence is golden, that is not true. We expect the hobby companies to care more. We want them to care more. We want them to have people on their team that are like us, that really care. And we're holding them to higher standards. To bring it back around to Ken's question, is that I do think they're listening. I do think they care, but there are reasons why things don't happen instantaneously in this industry. But you have a choice to vote with your dollars of figuring out who do I want to do business with. And if you have a choice to spend $100 on something, where and how you spend that is your choice. If you're not pleased with a card company's customer service or a grading company's customer service or any other company in the industry, then you can act accordingly. Again, I'm real big on positive tone. When something's negative, let's get it fixed constructively and be part of the solution. So thanks, everybody. Be back again in a couple days, another episode.